Hey, everybody, this is Steve Van Diest. I am the co host of the Sharpen Podcast brought to you by Acumen. Acumen is a CEO and business owner peer community. We are committed to helping you grow your top line, optimize your bottom line, but also enrich your storyline. And today I am super excited. A new friend of mine, probably one of the most experienced, wise, humble leaders I know, is going to talk to us about a couple things that I think will really grab your heart. How do you stay creative in your corporation? This is a man that over 40 years led public companies, big companies, but how do you stay creative? But then also, how do you gain consensus as you're changing an organization, a large company, for massive strategic growth? And I think we'll also talk about some of his personal story that has made him who he is and what makes him special. So today, we have a new growth catalyst on the Front Range of Colorado, Rick McCullough. Welcome. Glad to have you. Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got to this point in your career and in your life.
Well, first, Steve, thanks for the very kind comments. Yeah, I spent about 40 years in business, many as a CEO. I've worked in both public and private companies, and I've also been an owner of three small family businesses. Then in mid 2023, about a year and a half, my whole life changed. I lost my wife of 50 years. And initially, I must admit, I kind of ended up in a fog. It was a dramatic impact. I began to think about, well, about my past life, but also my future life, and came to the realization I wasn't going to spend my retirement the way I had thought and had planned. But during that process, I really did a introspection and realized I had been blessed all my life, family-wise and career. And so I came to the conclusion that whatever remainder of my lifetime I have, I want to do more to give back to my community. And so when I began to think about, well, how could I do that? I realized that probably the area that I had the most experience and perhaps the most to give was in the area of business. And so I've decided that I want to try to help as much as I can the Denver business community, an area that I know best. If you think about a 40-year career in business, and I worked for some very large companies, it's probably not surprising that I got the opportunity to work with and work for some very talented professionals. And during the course of that, I've worked in different business cycles. Like I said, I've worked for multi-billion-dollar companies. I've worked for new startup companies. So I've seen businesses big and small. My career was actually not something I set out to accomplish. It just kind of happened. I kept being recruited to take on new responsibilities. But all the while, every step of the way, when I look back, I feel like I learned a little bit more about business, about the financial aspects of business, and really about things like corporate culture and how you get the most out of people. And when you think about it, the CEO position can be a very challenging position. It's one where you have to balance decisions that you're called to make, and a lot of times there's kind of competing issues. You have to balance employee expectations, their wants and their needs. You have to balance your vendors. You have to balance your owners. And you have to do it all from the backdrop of your personal values. And it can be challenging. And sometimes I think CEOs just need a trusted sounding board, somebody a confidential advisor that they can talk through the issues, seek advice, and that's what I hope to give back to the Denver business community.
When I look back on my entrepreneurial career between retail and manufacturing, and they were small businesses, if I had a Rick in my life, I think he would have saved me. Well, I can think of $1 million issue here, a friendship here, multiple pieces in my life that you would have saved me having you in my life. I didn't prep you on this, but uh, what are, so in your career, it's pretty substantial. And sometimes people are like, oh, in that world of working for these very large companies, can you name drop a couple of some famous other CEOs that you met along the way that you go, ooh, that was an experience? I didn't prep you on this one. Are there any of these people that we would know in those years? You're like, oh yeah, that person influenced me, or I got to spend a weekend at a conference with that person. Any of those kind of famous leaders that we've heard about?
Well, I don't know about ones that would be that recognizable. I mean, I work for JP Morgan Securities, for example. I worked for Deloitte, the
Hmm.
big consulting CPA firm. I ran a reasonably large public energy company here in Denver that people would know and recognize. But it's mostly, and I was blessed, to do like executive leadership training at UNC Chapel Hill, for example. So I got exposed to a lot of great training opportunities. But when I've taken kind of assessments before, I come from an accounting financial background, and so very very commonly used skills there are things like logic and numbers, mathematics, how those things fit together. But I've often been told that I have kind of unusual communication skills, probably marketing abilities that you don't typically see in a financial person. And I think that served me extremely well during the course of my career.
So give me an example. I've heard you say before that you were really good, and obviously you've got this technical, financial, accounting brain that just works. Fascinating, but you could take complex ideas and make them really simple for your staff to help turn growth. Give me an example that how you saw that in your leadership, some lessons learned of taking those complex things and making them simple to execute for your company.
Yeah, I think probably the best example would be kind of relatively early in my career, maybe at the 10 or 15-year point. Um, I worked for a company, a startup company that was in the utility space, but it was also when the natural gas marketplace nationally was going through deregulation, and it created new business opportunities. And so I was part of an executive team that started up this company, and we grew it to about $1 billion in assets while I was there. But my kind of claim to fame was it was a municipal organization, and so it had access to exempt financing at lower interest rates. The people that I worked with came out of the taxable part of the industry, out of the natural gas industry, and we addressed and came up with a solution where we could use tax exempt financing done through bond issues to raise capital that we would then acquire gas supplies to meet our needs. And it had never been done nationally. We had to work around restrictive tax law and business law. So I got to work with some very bright tax attorneys. Then when we did the transaction, it yielded considerable benefits for our organization and our membership. And so it became kind of a national transaction. And over the course of my career, over the next 5 to 10 years, I probably did about $3 billion worth of those transactions. But probably the most revealing part of it is not that was creative, and I'm very pleased about that. But what it took to complete those transactions was I would often sit at a table that I would lead maybe 8 or 10 different professionals, and they came from all different areas, mostly legal advisors that were trying to protect the bond issue, where they were trying to protect the rating agency that was reviewing the transaction, the bond insurance party. And there I learned how to do what I can best call win-win transactions. I was I was skilled at listening to the different constituents, understanding what their needs were and where they saw the risk, and then helping them come up with solutions that would overcome their concerns and kind of pull the group together to get the transaction done. And
There's something special in that, because when they're all high profile leaders, and we're talking big dollar signs and movements that we're working with. The ability to work with people and egos in a room says a lot about your ego, and says a lot about your humility as a leader, a servant leader. I want to touch on that. What was some of the How did you come about that? What was some of the younger years or the experiences that grew you into this servant leader that was a listener, that was win-win? It wasn't just about Rick's movement up in the corporate ladder. What kind of birthed some of that? What was the impetus for that?
well, when I think back to um, the early years of my career, um, early on when I was at Deloitte, I was tasked with being kind of involved actually in coaching. Back then, we
Hmm.
called coaching helping employees determine what their career aspirations were and where they uh, were headed. And at that time, I just learned the value of preparation. I am known for being um, somebody that maybe spends an overt amount of time, but I just like to be prepared. I like to understand the business challenge, but understand it from the different perspectives, because you'll never solve problems and come up with compromise solutions unless you understand the other person's point of view. And so, and then the other thing that I learned at a very early point in my career, I was actually working for Deloitte, and we were doing an audit of a Fortune 500 company, and it was failing. And it was clear that that company was going to go out of business. Well, when you work for a public accounting firm of that size and you issue your opinion, you're basically saying this company can survive for the next 12 months. So that it's a high risk type uh, issue. And the Deloitte team pulled me off the audit and had me do an operational review of the company. So I was not just looking at the financial reporting, I was looking at really the inherent cash flow in the business, and I kind of gained an understanding of the importance of cash flow and how it impacted the inherent valuation and continuity of a business. And I think that skills probably helped me throughout my entire career.
Sounds like your younger years in your 20s and your 30s. When was the first time you were actually leading an organization? About how old were you?
I began leading people probably in my early 30s,
Yeah, so
maybe
those
late 20s.
yeah, those early years, they gave you an exposure to not just being part of a cog. They actually allowed you to see some different solutions, creativity, a problem. You have a problem solving knack, but they also fostered that, it sounded like. But then they also put you in an environment where you developed as a leader, and not just, hey, this is my idea and ramrod it. You could pull people around. I heard things like, I'm a good listener. I learned to listen better. It was just in my preparation as well. What were some of the greatest lessons that you've learned over your career? I know you've highlighted a couple things, but are there any stories or lessons learned that you can go, ooh, that was one. It was painful, but I learned it well.
It's kind of interesting that you asked that question. Probably, um, I learned how to treat people the way I wanted to be treated. Early in my career, when I went to work for that utility company that we grew to $1 billion company, I was one of three recruited executives, and two of the guys came from the same part of the country, and they'd actually worked together before. And I was a new guy on the financial side. Well, 2 years into the development of the company, the CEO left the company, and so there was an opportunity to step up and become the new CEO. And the younger guy that he knew was selected. And of course, I felt like I had been um, wronged somewhat. I was disappointed, but in retrospect, I decided to stay and support him. We developed a wonderful business relationship, and that's really what led me into investment banking because I designed that transaction and I got recruited into investment banking. And so, from a career point of view, it was actually a good decision to stay. Now, fast forward probably about 10 years, I was running a large public company, and um, we had we had to make a strategic reorganization of the company. I became CEO of the company when natural gas prices were $13 an MMBTU. Prices fell to $3 an MMBTU. And all of a sudden, the good news was I was in charge of a good sized company. The bad news was 85% of our business was natural gas. And it was a small town type business. Over the next 2 years, I led a restructuring in the company. I had great team, but I had to get them organized around we've got to do some things to survive. And fortunately, I had introduced a kind of a sophisticated approach that they had never followed the year before the prices collapsed, and we had hedged a lot of our exposure. So we had about 150 to $200 million of positive cash flow coming in because of that decision I made the year before. But we led a turnaround, and the way we did it was we analyzed what we could do. We analyzed our existing assets, and here's where cash flow comes back again. I got us focused on the most efficient cash flowing assets. We kind of reconfigured our production. We used some of the capital to go acquire more oil-based properties, and over a 2 year period, we completely turned around the company and got it to the stock, I think, went from $9 a share to $49 a share. But where what I learned comes in is after the 2 years, we were the top performing oil and gas company in the country, but my board of directors wanted to take a path of doing acquisitions. I still felt like we ought to stay kind of building out our inventory and growing a bit more because we'd almost failed. Company almost failed. But more importantly, they wanted me to make an organizational change that would have an adverse impact on one of my direct reports. And so that experience that I'd learned years ago about going through and being treated in a way that I didn't think was fair kind of came back to me. And I made probably one of the hardest decisions in my life. I told him I wouldn't do it, and I ended up leaving the company.
Yeah, you've played in a world it was high risk. It was also high reward, but you stuck to your values. As you look at younger leaders, there's, gosh, a millennial generation are starting and buying up companies. My son's in the process of looking to buy a company. And then there's startup crazy people like myself and people that are in the corporate world playing big business and different realms. What do you think of the some of the mistakes that you're seeing in business owners and leaders around you and from your experience? Are there some mistakes or situations that they're in that they're just missing? Do you, because your wisdom is profound. I want to learn from you. Do you notice anything that people are missing?
I don't know that I would say that I see things are missing. I can definitely illustrate things that I think to leaders that are extremely important.
Mm.
If you want to build and grow your businesses, I mean, and back to the values, back to having the right kind of values, the CEO is trying to create the culture. And in the culture, you're trying to create a culture of trust, collaboration, you know, kind of working towards common goals. But one of the biggest challenges that I think business has faced is the integration of corporate goals down to operating unit goals and tactics. It's kind of like you'll hear a lot of times, and this is why, unfortunately, there's turnover and you'll lose good people. Is I think most good people want to contribute. They want to
Yeah.
be part of a team. They want to help, but they don't. If they're down in the lower levels, they haven't achieved the executive level. They don't see how they fit in, and so like at the strategic turnaround that I led, I was blessed to have extremely strong leaders. And so what I did was just from the top try to help them understand what we had to accomplish. And then it was kind of funny. I took my executives and I said, guys, we're at a different time than we have been in the past. You've got to start taking on more responsibility to save the company. And so what I made everybody do was take two of their everyday requirements, their assignments, and said, delegate that down. I said, you have to delegate down part of your job to the next level. That will be challenging to them. That will be rewarding. And then you have to take on some things that are higher level, maybe more strategic things that we just got to build. But by doing that, we kind of pushed it down and then made every job identify how they were contributing to the corporate goals.
Yeah.
And over that 2 year period, we changed everything from compensation structure to how we tracked performance. And so I think, I'm very proud of the results, but when you look at it, it's a lot of hard work, but you've got to understand the importance of it, because if you can engage the team and they understand what they need to do. And the other thing we tried to do is we tried to put measuring systems in place where the executives didn't have to go around and give everybody an attaboy every day.
Mm.
They could see it in their performance. They could see
Love
the
it.
numbers that they were achieving.
Yeah. Okay, so there's something this is not just Rick reading this in a book, going through an MBA program, a college program, a Deloitte training program. There's something that made Rick who he is. There's a personal value set, there's your personal story. Tell us now, you alluded to some of it a little bit at the beginning about your wife, but what's Rick's personal story? What made you who you are?
I, I can't believe how fortunate I've been. I was born in Mississippi. My dad was a sergeant in the Air Force, 6 children, very, very humble beginnings. We He got transferred and we relocated every probably 2 or 3 years. So I've never built lasting friendships. I was always the new kid on the block. But everything changed when I was about 20 years old. Um, I had what I'd never heard before. I had what some people call a V moment. Um, I had finished, I'd paid for my school. I started with a basketball scholarship. I'm kind of a competitive person, you can probably tell. Um, and I had transferred to a new school, and I met a French lady there who was actually a professor at the school. And on our first date, we got attacked by somebody, a crazy guy who intended to kill both of us. And the the event probably lasted 10 or 15 minutes. I ended up getting busted in the back of my head by a gun, um, had 50 stitches, and actually got shot in the chest with a 45 pistol. When I look back, I shouldn't have survived that night. But we did, and that's the woman I married. We lived 50 years together, almost kind of a storybook type of relationship. She supported me in my career. My job was my career and being the breadwinner for the family. She did volunteer work in the schools, raised our children. And we were honestly 50-50 partners. And I can honestly tell you, I don't think we had a single serious argument in our whole 50 years. But when I lost her to cancer, it caused me to look back on my life and my career. And I couldn't believe how many times I saw God's fingerprints in my life. And I did something that I still can't explain to you. I started reading, and I was never a reader. I'd read business publications, but I started reading spiritual books.
Hmm.
I read Rick Warren's book on the purpose-driven life. I started reading books about near-death experiences, led me into the Bible, led me to Bible study, led me to a men's fellowship group and active in the church. And I just realized that I've been just remarkably blessed. And now I want to give back to others. My children, I've made enough money in business. My children and grandchildren are set. I don't need to make any more money. And I hope that if I'm successful at Acumen, anything that I can do, I'm going to help other charities and churches because it's just time for me to give back.
Well, you're giving back, even just in this short 25 minutes of asking you questions, the ability to give back from your experiences to help other business leaders is profound. Your personal story, that V moment, I'm so grateful for that moment because I think some of those darkest moments transform our lives, and it did. I think God had his hand on you. He has gifted you and blessed you with being a profound leader in small to big businesses. I'm grateful to get to work alongside of you. I am grateful in advance for the 10 to 15 CEOs and business owners that are going to get to spend time with you every month on a peer team in Acumen here on the Front Range. They're going to be blown away by your presence, your wisdom, your ability to encourage. You can see it in your story. You were about people, you were about culture, you were about listening. It was win-win, but it was also extremely wise in your strategic decisions and the creativity to pivot companies and how to manage all that chaos. Your ability also to say cash is king. We have to have cash to make this work. I'm grateful for the wisdom that you've shared with us. What are you reading now? Is there something you're currently reading? Is there a book you're reading now that's challenging you, inspiring you, sharpening you right now?
Well, I found it. So that process started about a year and a half ago. I've probably read 25 books in the last 18 months. Probably the most recent book I think I read by, can't remember the names. It's the minister that runs the Elevation Church in Charlotte, North
Oh
Carolina.
yeah.
And he wrote a book, I think it's like something about the 7 miles, the last.
Mm.
7 miles, deals with the death and resurrection of Jesus and the seven statements he made in his final time on the cross. And then he apparently joined two believers on their trip back to Jerusalem, a 7 mile walk. He walked with them, and they didn't recognize him. And he sat down with them to have dinner, and they said when he broke the bread, he had his hands out, and they saw the nail marks in his hand and realized who he was, and then he disappeared. So it was a fascinating book, kind of
I love it.
relating both the last days of Jesus, but also what they did upon realizing it was Jesus is they went back and told the story. And so
Yeah.
it's like a book trying to encourage us to, share our experiences and then, um, kind of tell the story to others to try to build the kingdom.
Yes. Yes. Well, Rick, how can people find you? Where's a place to find you, to meet with you? What's a good method?
Well, I've for years had a LinkedIn page, and I've just updated that for my Acumen involvement. Acumen has a web page, acumenimpact.com, where there's going to be a brief summary of myself and ways in which to contact. That's probably the best avenue to find me.
I love it.
And
Yeah. And here on the Front Range, yes, you can visit acumenimpact.com to find out more if you're a business owner and a CEO that goes, I want to spend time with this man. I want to be on his peer team because I want to see what he builds to help us grow our business. You're going to find happy hours on our event page. We have different workshops for CEOs and owners only. And so I encourage you to visit that page. And if you're feeling, you're hearing this, and you're a business owner and CEO across the country, I am struggling. I'm alone. I'm making bad decisions, or I just want some extra wisdom in my life from former business owners like myself and Rick and many others, but also to be in a room with 250 years worth of godly men and women that have run businesses that are helping you every month. Come fill out kind of a check us out page on Acumen and to find out more resources. We'd love to help you sharpen, be challenged, be inspired. And Rick, I'm excited about your journey. I'm excited to run alongside you and the impact that we're going to have here on the Front Range. I appreciate your time today.
thank you, Steve. I'm so glad that I met you and learned about Acumen and look forward to trying to help others in our business community.
Thank you all for listening to the Sharpen podcast, and we'll see you in a couple weeks.